people of God are defined at all times by their relationship to His character. This is why in Revelation chapter 14 and verse 12, it says, "Here is the patience of the saints. Here are they that keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus." In the first part of this series, we established that it is God's desire for us to reflect His character in this world. And nothing allows us to reflect the character of God more than an obedience to the fourth commandment. Because the Sabbath is holy, and it can only be kept by people who are holy. And since we ourselves are not holy, we become completely dependent upon the righteousness of Christ in order to fully be able to appreciate the beauty of the Sabbath and all the commandments of God. At this time, though, and in this crisis, we are reaching a point where the events recorded in Revelation 13 are going to test whether or not we will actually be faithful to the commandments of God. Events are beginning to unfold already, showing that the state will make certain determinations about who can buy and who can sell. In Revelation 13, verse 16 says, "And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name." There is a relationship between our ability to buy and sell and our preparedness for the test which is coming to us in obedience to the commandments of God. An individual who puts themselves into debt to those in this world will be considered by God to be the servant of this world. In Proverbs 22 verse 7, it says, "The rich ruleth over the poor, and the borrower is servant to the lender." Whose servant are you? Are you in debt to the people of this world? Or have you prepared yourself by putting your treasure there where it will never go away? That's why in Matthew chapter 6, starting at verse 19, it says, "Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." And so in the second part of our study, we established that our financial health and well-being is preparing us to see if we will be able to stand the test when it finally does come. Unfortunately, it is my conclusion that the majority of those who profess to be God's people, I'm not speaking here about the majority of the world. I'm speaking here about the majority of those who profess to be among God's Advent people today, do not seem to realize the importance of the events that have been taking place in these very few months that we have been experiencing this coronavirus pandemic. It seems that the majority of people are simply waiting for this period to pass and go back living exactly the way that they lived before. That is not going to happen. Already, the authorities are beginning to establish a pattern of behavior with people that shows that individuals, by and large, are willing to give up their freedoms and liberties. And I want to be very careful here. I do believe that it's important for you to follow the guidelines that are being placed down during a pandemic, because I feel that these guidelines are biblical. Distance yourself, for example, is common. It's biblical. Leviticus 13 discusses this, that during the time of pandemic, you're supposed to distance yourself from others. You are not supposed to attend gatherings. When you're sick, you're supposed to go outside of the camp. You're supposed to be separated from the people, not to spread the contagion. This is biblical. So I want to be very careful here to state that you should be caring about others and making sure that you would not pass on something to them that even though you might be healthy, they might not be, and you could give it to them and actually cause them harm. I would never, ever want to do that. But I can't ignore that the events of the moment are showing that the authorities are willing to take away civil liberties, even civil liberties that are constitutionally guaranteed. In the United States of America, this country was founded on that notion of personal liberty, of the individual making decisions for themselves. This is why the famous quote from Patrick Henry is there, where Patrick Henry said, "Give me liberty or give me death," at the Second Virginia Convention. He said these words because they were encapsulating the idea that was giving birth to this nation. Give me my freedom, give me my liberty, or give me death. And so this idea was enshrined within the founding documents of the United States. In fact, the Declaration of Independence in 1776 says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." You and I don't have rights that are granted to us by the state. In fact, here in the United States, our rights are granted to us by God. That's what it says. They're given to us by our Creator. It is not the state that gives rights, but the Creator that gives rights, which means that only the Creator should have the ability to take these rights away. But during this pandemic, we've seen that individuals are willing to give up their personal liberties for some perceived security. This started during 9/11, and my generation remembers these events very, very clearly. Because during that time in 9/11, we saw rights being taken away for issue of security in order to protect us. And so we gave away certain personal liberties at that time for the security of the nation. But there really wasn't an effect of don't buy, don't sell. In fact, as we saw in our last presentation, at that time, they wanted us to go and to buy, to sell, to do all these commercial activities. But now in this pandemic, rules have been put into place to test whether or not we as a population are willing to allow our personal rights for the pursuit of happiness, in other words, for the right to own personal property, to acquire wealth for ourselves. Laws were made limiting our rights to the pursuit of happiness. And we have shown that we are willing to allow the state to make these laws. So while this coronavirus event does not fulfill Revelation 13, it surely does prepare the way for Revelation 13 when it occurs. The principles that we have in the US Constitution, we must understand as divinely inspired. As Adventists, we have taught this from early times of Adventism. In Signs of the Times on November 1st, 1899, it says, "These principles are the secret of our power and prosperity as a nation. Those who first found an asylum on the shores of America rejoiced that they had reached a country free from the arrogant claims of popery and the tyranny of kingly rule. They determined to establish a government upon the broad foundation of civil and religious liberty." That liberty is granted to us by God. At this time, we must understand that these liberties are being taken away in preparation for the time when the events of Revelation 13 will fully be implemented. At that time, it will not be about not performing an activity, but will actually be about forcing us to perform an activity and forbidding us from performing that which God has enjoined us to perform. If we are not taking this seriously now, we will not be prepared at that time. Too many Adventists today are just waiting for this event to pass. They're thinking that this is not a big deal. It reminds me of the story that's told of King George III. Now, the story is apocryphal in nature, but it had to do with his character, his dismissiveness, in how he thought about what was happening in the colonies at that time. And so the story went that in his diary on July 4th of 1776, he wrote the words, "Nothing important happened today." Now, that story may not be accurate, but it reflected his character of the time. He really felt that the events that were happening in America were not that big of a deal, that the British Army would be able to take care of anything that happened in the colonies. And so he didn't take it seriously. For many of us, we are acting the same way. We are saying, nothing important happened today. I'm going to continue to live as I did before. I'm going to continue to dress as I did before. I'm going to continue to eat as I did before. I'm going to continue to worship as I did before. I'm going to continue to act as I did before. There will be no change because I'm just going to go back to what I did before. This is not God's plan. Those who do not recognize the time in which we live are going to prepare themselves for the mark of the beast. That same article, November 1st, 1899 in Signs of the Times, says, the message, speaking of the message of the third angel, containing this warning is the last to be proclaimed before the revelation of the Son of Man. The signs which he himself has given declare his coming to be near at hand. In the issue of the great contest, two parties are developed, those who worship the beast and his image and receive his mark, and those who receive the seal of the living God, who have the Father's name written in their foreheads. This is not a visible mark. The time has come when all who have an interest in their soul's salvation should earnestly and solemnly inquire, what is the seal of God and what is the mark of the beast? How can we avoid receiving it? You notice that the statement here is very clear, that the mark of the beast is not some visible thing. It's not a visible mark. It's the absence of the seal of God. The seal of God, a reflection of his character in this world. The absence of God's character is what marks you as a follower of the beast in the camp of the enemy. Now, I'm not that old, but I'm older, and I remember when credit cards were actually just being heavily promoted. It used to be that credit cards, when they came out, were given to very select people, wealthy people, and so forth. But eventually it got to the point where they wanted people to start getting into debt. And so credit cards started to be commonly available. And people started getting into debt. And so people within the church started teaching, don't get a credit card because that's the mark of the beast. It's not. It's not. But your use of the credit card could be preparing you to receive the mark of the beast. The mark of the beast is not a visible thing, but it is the absence of the seal of God. Are you asking yourself that question? Are you saying, am I prepared to receive the seal of God? Or am I preparing myself to receive the mark of the beast? That question you are answering right now. This is why in volume 5 of the Testimonies, page 451, it says, by the decree enforcing the institution of the papacy in violation of the law of God, our nation will disconnect herself fully from righteousness. When Protestantism shall stretch her hand across the gulf to grasp the hand of the Roman power, when she shall reach over the abyss to clasp hands with spiritualism, when, under the influence of this threefold union, our country shall repudiate every principle of its constitution as a Protestant and Republican government, and shall make provision for the propagation of papal falsehoods and delusions, then we may know that the time has come for the marvelous working of Satan and that the end is near. Right now, we are not being forced into papal falsehoods. But what has been taking place right now? The principles of freedom enshrined in the Constitution are being removed. Every single Adventist should know what this means. Each and every one of us should recognize that this marks a clear turning point in prophecy. We have had terrible events happen in the past. We've had events occur in the different world wars, in different wars and calamities, and all these were signs of a kind. But what is happening right now in the removal of personal liberties is a direct fulfillment of this prophecy found in volume 5 of the Testimonies. We are removing the principles of the Constitution. The rights to freedom are being removed. Every single Adventist should know that this means that the coming of the Lord is very, very soon. Am I preparing myself for this? In the Signs of the Times, the week after the article that we read a few moments ago, a follow-up article was written, November the 8th, 1899. In that article, it states, "With rapid steps, we are approaching this period, when Protestant churches shall unite with the secular power in sustaining a false religion, for opposing which their ancestors endured the fiercest persecution. Then will the papal Sabbath be enforced by the combined authority of church and state. There will be a national apostasy, which will end only in national ruin. The laws of nations should be respected when they do not conflict with the laws of God. But when there is collision between them, every true disciple of Christ will say, as did the Apostle Peter when commanded to speak no more in the name of Jesus, we ought to obey God rather than men." This generation right now that has grown up after 9/11 does not seem to understand what personal liberties are. They're willing to give them away so easily because they never had to fight for them. Within Adventism, the generation that grew up knowing that they had brethren behind the Iron Curtain who were suffering for the faith, that generation is slowly going away. And this new generation, even of Adventists, is forgetting what it meant to have to suffer for the faith. So willing to ignore the signs that are happening around us. You cannot do this. The time is now when these prophecies are being fulfilled. If I would receive the seal of God, the condition now is the same as it ever was. That same condition remains because there is a crisis now, and in the crisis, it will be revealed who is ready. Christ Object Lesson, page 412. It is in a crisis that character is revealed. When the earnest voice proclaimed at midnight, "Behold, the bridegroom cometh, go ye out to meet him," and the sleeping virgins were roused from their slumbers, it was seen who had made preparation for the event. Right now, you are determining if you are prepared for that great final test which is coming. Are you preparing yourself? Both parties were taken unawares, but one was prepared for the emergency, and the other was found without preparation. So now, a sudden and unlooked for calamity, something that brings the soul face to face with death, will show whether there is any real faith in the promises of God. Right now, you are showing if you are prepared or not. Are you actually prepared for this event? Why is this important? Let's keep reading. It will show whether the soul is sustained by grace. The great final test comes at the close of human probation when it will be too late for the soul's need to be supplied. Do you understand this? Do you understand that when the events of Revelation chapter 13 occur, it will be too late? Today, right now, you are determining whether or not you will pass that test. In essence, you're passing the test today. The command in Exodus chapter 20, verse 8, is to remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. But who can keep it holy? Only one who's prepared for it. In Great Controversy 605, it says, the Sabbath will be the great test of loyalty, for it is the point of truth especially controverted. When the final test shall be brought to bear upon men, then the line of distinction will be drawn between those who serve God and those who serve him not. Right now, you are preparing for the final test, because when the final test comes, it will be too late for the soul's need to be supplied. So how do you prepare for the test? Desire of Ages 283. No other institution which was committed to the Jews tended so fully to distinguish them from surrounding nations as did the Sabbath. God designed that its observance should designate them as his worshipers. It was to be a token of their separation from idolatry and their connection with the true God. But in order to keep the Sabbath holy, men must themselves be holy. Through faith, they must become partakers of the righteousness of Christ. Do you not understand that the test is coming? Do you not see that in the removal of personal liberties taking place right now, in the fundamental changes to the Constitution that are being prepared right now, prophecy is being fulfilled? That the final events rapidly about to take place will show whether or not you have submitted your life to the life of Christ. Is your life bound up with him? Are you clothed by the righteousness of Christ? Only one with this righteousness can keep the Sabbath holy, and that will be the test. Are you ready? The Lord has offered you this great gift, and this short time of mercy which we have remaining to us is given for us to experience the hope of our glory. This is why the Apostle Paul wrote to the Colossians, to whom God would make known what is the riches of the glory of this mystery among the Gentiles, which is Christ in you, the hope of glory. Right now, you have this opportunity to receive Jesus Christ, to receive his righteousness, to be changed into his image. And so he continues in verse 28 to say to them, whom we preach, warning every man and teaching every man in all wisdom, that we may present every man perfect in Christ Jesus. That's God's desire for you. In Bible Commentary Volume 4, on page 1161, it says, just as soon as the people of God are sealed in their foreheads, it is not any seal or mark that can be seen, but a settling into the truth, both intellectually and spiritually, so they cannot be moved. Just as soon as God's people are sealed and prepared for the shaking, it will come. Indeed, it has already begun. Volume 7 of the Bible Commentary, page 970, says the seal of the living God will be placed upon those who bear a likeness to Christ in character. This is what God is asking of you, a victory which you can experience right now, which is why on that day, those who have experienced the righteousness of Christ, who have recognized that the time of his coming is soon at hand, will prepare themselves, and looking up on that day will be able to say the wonderful words recorded in Isaiah chapter 25 and verse 9. Lo, this is our God. We have waited for him, and he will save us. This is the Lord. We've waited for him. We will be glad and rejoice in his salvation.
The mission and passion of 21st Missionary is sharing a clear and engaging gospel. Like and subscribe to watch more messages like this one. Thank you.